Good morning, and thank you for joining today's webinar presented by the Malware Chamber of Commerce on protecting your business from the risks of unrestricted Internet access, sponsored by R&D Legal Bookkeeping. Here is John Lalutis, President of Superior Technology Solutions, to present Creating an Information Security Policy.
Good morning. Thank you for joining our webinar today, which is Creating an Information Security Policy. Which is very effective in creating a security plan that best fits your business objectives and your business needs. With the multitude of information security issues and risks that are out there, an information security policy is needed to take a structured approach in setting out an information security plan so that a plan can be in place at all times and evolve continuously to meet your needs. I've put on here, I got a slide with information security risks, but these risks are just the tip of the iceberg, and just to kind of give some examples of what we need to look out for. The first one, viruses, spyware, and malware, they have some misconception to them that and sometimes treat it like they're all the same, but in fact they're quite different, and they're different because of the footprints that they leave and how they try to infiltrate the environments. Now, your standard virus software would be effective at detecting viruses that are already known that may reside on your machine, but they don't do a very good job at detecting spyware and malware. And so what companies wind up doing is they wind up getting separate pieces of software, and in the end, like I said before, they're only as good as the definitions of the virus, spyware, and malware are already known. Phishing attempts is something that's grown exponentially. And phishing attempts, just from a definition standpoint of what that is when someone portrays themselves as a trusted source and tries to get confidential or sensitive information from you. You can see this through emails that appear to be spam, appear to be presented by someone at your bank saying, hey, your account's been frozen, there's a problem with your account. Why don't you click on this link and we'll get everything fixed, and once you key in your account information and your routing code, you normally have a problem after that. Unauthorized access is another issue that, and that's not only from an external point of view of people trying to get into your environment, but internal as well. And then there's a whole bunch of security risks that pertain not so much to anything malicious, but just as a normal course of working, how do we prevent the dissemination of confidential information, especially with the multitude of mobile devices that exist in today's environment. It becomes more challenging than ever to make sure information about our customers and confidential information about our company is maintained and protected. Legal exposure, the regulatory environment in doing business in today's technical environment is turning out new legislation almost on a daily basis. This is seen quite strongly in the area of privacy, where a lot of states, particularly California, has very, very strict privacy violations and very strict fines of what kind of information that you're capturing about customers and people in general. Illegal content and activity. Now, I've presented this in different cases for a lot of other companies, and people say, well, my employees would never do any illegal activity or download any content. But what happens is hackers will grab usually some space on your public network segment and actually install their own applications there and try to be very stealth about it so they're not detected. And in the end, you have an environment that's got illegal content and activity going on. Email exposure. Another area that needs to have strong focus on. Mobile devices. Now we have tablets and phones and people using their own phones for emails, and we also have to place a strong focus on the traditional devices, the laptops and so on, and be able to react quickly when those devices are lost or compromised. The use of social networks has also introduced a somewhat relatively new information security risks where people that are may work in the social network environment using some of those tools, and it's not a good idea to have company-specific information residing in those environments. Some examples, just overall, 30 million new malware threats were created just alone in 2013. That's 82,000 a day. So if you're sitting there with virus software, spyware, malware, these 82,000 you will not be able to detect. They're becoming far more sophisticated than they are in the past, and there's actually malware sites and networks that grew 240% in just 2011 alone, dedicated to launching these attacks. So no longer do they use other people's computers to propagate viruses and malware. They now can get more penetration quicker by using their own networks and sites. 50% of targeted attacks were aimed at companies with less than 2,500 employees. That means that these attacks normally are not focused, but just looking for weaknesses in environments that where they can compromise and get information from. 232 million identities were exposed alone in 2011. And the biggest statistic on here is 86% of all websites had at least one serious vulnerability, and this is a study done by security company White Hat last May. But the most striking thing about that 86% is that the average number of serious vulnerabilities across all sites is 56, which is very, very high. Most data breach victims are a target of opportunity, and 96% of attacks are not considered highly difficult. So the misnomer about malware infiltration and hackers is that they're usually considered ingenious as what they're doing to get into companies' computing environments, when in fact it's really the weakness of the company computing environment that's allowing them to be successful. So what do we do about all this? How does this all get managed and approached? So fragmented approaches have a limited effect. So if you go out and try to react to the vulnerability of the day or certain aspects about just throwing out a firewall or just putting virus protection software on there, you're just reacting to what's in place today and what the threats are, and they evolve so quickly that what's being done today will probably have a limited effect tomorrow. Individually addressing threats will be costly, as rapidly evolving threats will require different solutions. And standard firewall deployments, client virus protection is not sufficient for protecting company information. And that really gives companies really a false sense of security. For example, the breach that many people may be aware of at the big retailers at the end of 2013, company had in place, standard level of security, firewalls, and maybe even an information security policy that they've had to show their clients and auditors and so on. But in fact, is one of them allowed a connection in from a vendor, which the hackers took as an entry point, and their firewall had ports and services open, which they used as an escape route. So in the end, the tools that they had in place may have even enabled some of that. Information security policy goals. So where do we start? And basically these three main points is we create standards for the configuration, deployment, and management of company computing assets with a focus on the protection of information. So it's what are we using as all our devices, our computing environment, our network, and then how do we build a model that makes sure that all these components and computing devices are protected. The standards for use of company computing assets. So how do we use company computers? How do we do our business with the best level of productivity while still maintaining security on the corporate information? Defines the standards and creates awareness throughout the company regarding the use and communication of company information. And this is really even outside of our company computing, our company network. In general, how do we treat our information? How do we communicate, and what tools do we use and what tools do we not use to do this? And most importantly, the most important bullet on this particular is it creates a foundation for the secure implementation and use of all company hardware, software, and technology solutions. This is a building block tool that helps you evolve your security policy, which will provide you with the ongoing protection and understanding of what your environment has from a security standpoint. Security policy should address the design and architecture of the company network, This is very important because this is the introduction of your business to the public network. So this is where the most focus needs to be made, and the most security needs to be placed. Standard configuration for all computing devices. Companies get in trouble a lot of times because they allow too many pieces of software, which has unknown effects and unknown vulnerabilities and risk as it relates to security. Standards for the use of company information and computers, and standards for the creation, management, content, and removal of all company IDs and passwords. Network design and architecture. Should establish an isolated perimeter network, and put this in more layman's term, is that you should have a network segment that's solely dedicated to only devices that need public access, and then place only servers required to satisfy public users on this segment. So this is kind of the place. This is the place you would put your web servers and any communication servers, such as FTP servers, on this public network segment. To ensure that no servers with sensitive company information, or really any company information, such as database servers, application servers, are placed on this segment. And I'll show you how that would appear in some diagrams I have coming up. And ensure applications are designed with multi-tiered architecture. And what this basically means is any application that you have, you should be able to take the presentation portion, which is your web screen, and separate it from your application logic, which is your executable, and your database, which should never be on the public network segment. So you should be able to take a presentation portion, put it on your web server, which then talks into your internal network. I'll give you a little bit of a picture of what that looks like in a minute. Ensure web servers applications perform cleansing of information to avoid data injections. And this is one of the most common application breaches. This is how hackers get information and change information on databases and companies and government institutions, schools. Is basically what they do is when you enter something into a screen, it could be a part description or just some sort of text area. What they do is they embed something called the SQL command with quotes inside of it. So when the program reads it, it'll actually execute the command. If the security access isn't appropriate, it will actually begin to change your data or delete your data or just read your data from your database. And ensure applications are designed and constructed securely. And a little bit some diagrams here of what I'm talking about. The middle segment here would be your public network segment. So you have your internet, here's your standard firewall, and then you would have your public network segment here, which is where your web server, there's a communication server, and there's a little environment here called a proxy server. And what a proxy server is it just is a device that talks to whatever the source, what destination device needs to be. So if you have an email proxy, it talks to your email server. If you have a web proxy, it talks to a web server on the internal. So there's never any access to any of these other devices, your applications, database, print, email, directly from the internet. Now in this particular diagram, these two firewalls, and this could be implemented with a one firewall configuration. Two firewalls gives you a little bit more level of security, but if you don't have a lot of services open up on the public segment here, a one firewall implementation is feasible. So here's an example of one firewall implementation where the firewall will allow traffic coming to your public segment, which is the same circle I had on the previous diagram, and then the only way that these devices here, the application database, is accessed is from these devices and never directly from the outside. So this gives you some layer of physical protection. But what should never happen is you should never have these servers here hooked to the public network segment, because these ports open on this firewall, which allow access to web servers and web FTP servers, and if they can get to the machine, they normally can get to some other area on your computer, which would be your database or application logic and so on. Wireless. Avoid installing wireless access points, but in today's world, that's very difficult to do, especially if you have an environment which supports scanning and other devices which need to have a wireless connection. So if wireless is a must, use WPA2, which is Wi-Fi Protected Access Security, and never use WEP. And the main reason for this is these tools out there that are widely available for cracking wireless networks. So if somebody gets in proximity to your wireless network, they don't actually have to hack in and figure out what to do. They could just run a program and they're on their network. It's that simple. And there's actually a lot of tools coming out now for Wi-Fi protected access as well. So what's needed to be done, really, and what's strongly recommended is a wireless intrusion prevention system, and this is normally required by a lot of regulatory requirements and compliance, and is required for PCI compliance. And wireless intrusion prevention system not only gives you monitoring of who's on your wireless network, but can actually put out intrusion alerts and be able to understand who's accessing your wireless networks. Consider implementing a network security appliance or firewall threat prevention module. Now, a lot of these firewall modules now are becoming far more intelligent than they used to be, and they're effective in blocking both spyware and malware at the network layer. So, traditional tools of addressing virus, spyware, malware has been, you get all that first, right? So you get the virus, and then you run something to try to remove it. But if you address it at the network layer, you can actually detect these things coming in and remove them before they get to any computing device. It provides for a proactive defense against evolving threats, and it's capable of handling previously unknown threats, which is known as zero-day attacks. And this is becoming more and more important each day. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, there's 82,000 new malware threats. The malware threats are becoming potentially more harmful, more intrusive, and zero-day attacks are not addressed by virus, malware, or spyware programs because they don't know about them. So anytime you can take them from the network layer, it's the better way to go. Information security policies should address standard computing configurations. Computers should have standard software configurations and only allow business-only software. So there's a lot of software out there that people may use on a personal basis when they come into work. The program that prints out the retail coupons and entertainment update programs and stuff. But these things are riddled with spyware and viruses, and makes the management of the environment much more difficult. Although I've pretty much have minimized the importance of virus protection, up to this point, every computer should have standard virus protection, and it should be updated on a regular and automated basis. And viruses are different than the spyware and malware. Is many of them are launched from emails, unsuspecting emails. People are not sure what the attachments are, and once they're put on the computer, they could do a lot of damage. And having standard virus protection will handle all of that. All laptops containing company information should be encrypted. It's been a big issue, specifically in the healthcare industry, of losing mobile devices and laptops with people's social security numbers on it, and then all you get from them is a 6-month subscription to protect my ID, and that's not going to be good enough in the future. Backup processes should be in place for all computing devices. Information security policies should address the use of company information. And some of the things to look at in here is avoid communicating sensitive information in the body of an email. If you look at the life cycle of an email, somebody creates an email, it gets sent, goes on server, it then heads off to its destination. It may be stored on 5 to 10 other servers, gets to its destination and stored on that server before it gets to the ultimate destination, the client. And the way email is today, it's just not one location that email could be stored on. It could go to somebody's PC, and at the same time go to somebody's cell phone, go to somebody's BlackBerry, go to somebody's tablet, and if there's confidential information in there, you could be, from one email, have many emails that are generated from that. Password protect and encrypt all sensitive company information and documents when possible. So that's pretty much the way they should be sent. If you need to send an email with sensitive information in, put it in a Word document, encrypt it, password protect it, and send it on its way. Create a policy that clearly communicates the company's position on sensitive information and external communication. So if people, in their own due diligence, work off hours, which many people do today, and these things that need to be done, don't use Facebook or Twitter to communicate the information. Still maintain that the company's email system is the main standard communication tool for the company. Standardized management, storage, and retention of company information. Retention is a big issue. If information isn't needed, isn't required to be kept, has outlived its value, it's better off deleted. And ensure access to information is provided on an as-needed basis only. Use of company computers. Create a company policy for the use of email and the Internet, and consider content blocking solutions to reduce risk. Now, again, a lot of intelligent appliances that exist today, and even some that are done in firewalls, have very flexible content blocking solutions, which means you're not blocking all sites so people can't look at the weather or they can't look at the news or general information. They know where the bad sites are, they know where the risky sites are, and then they block them on a category basis. So you still have, at the end of the day, if you're able to block the high-risk sites and the sites that you don't want people going to, you still have a fairly open and productive environment to use for business. Avoid the use of removable media. This is another issue that companies underestimate. The risks is thumbnail drives and CDs, and usually get tossed in someone's drawer. Those people leave. No one knows where the information is. They could get disposed of improperly, too, and then somebody can pick it up, plug it in, and the information is exposed. Establish secure standards for the remote access of computers. So, we need to get into the company systems on all hours, not necessarily when in the office, and we need to have remote access, but it needs to be secure so the remote access solution is not compromised itself. Managing information access, there needs to be a set of standards for that, where we establish a policy for the creation and removal of all user IDs and passwords. This was normally effective if there's a policy hooked in with HR that's standard when somebody joins the company and then when somebody leaves the company, so these things could be taken care of immediately so there isn't any access and IDs left around. Enforce the use of strong passwords. This is a critical issue I think businesses need to be a little bit more focused on, specifically with email. There's a lot of automated programs out there right now that all they do is read email directories, and they have a fairly sophisticated password cracking mechanism, so they can they'll get into any weak passwords and medium passwords, and once they get these accounts, they'll either use them for spamming, or they'll actually read the emails, and they'll attack emails IDs such as accounts, payables at such and company.com, and they'll read the emails, get some accounting information, and they'll start sending off phishing attempts to say, I'm so-and-so, this customer, we've changed our bank account ID, please do a wire transfer to this account instead of the old one. That's becoming very common. Establish a standard for automatic password expiration. Prohibit the saving of passwords within a web form. So if people have their IDs and passwords on a web form, all they need to do is have their computer compromised and the hacker has access already to the application without doing anything else. And create a clear process reflecting how the IT personnel will communicate with the business community regarding all access requirements. So there shouldn't be any processes going on with people calling up and saying, I need your password, or I'm trying to do something, can you just give me your password? There needs to be a very rigid process in place so people know that how password and user ID information is exchanged within the company on a standard basis. Most important aspect about an information security policy, and this is where I think companies like the big retailers fell down last year, is monitor, assess, and evolve. So you can have an information security policy, but it needs to be monitored. You need to assess it, and it needs to be evolved and improved over time so it continuously meets your environment. If your environment changes, you need to make sure the changes adhere to your security standards. Establish incident reporting processes to capture issues and identify trends. Evolve the security policy on an ongoing basis to adapt to the ever-changing threats and advancements in technology. Other things that could be done is actually do vulnerability testing on your applications, and this applies to packages and vendor-supplied applications. So these tools out there that can do that and tell you where the weaknesses are. Nessus and Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer are two tools that do that. And if you have a package and you run vulnerability testing against it, and these deficiencies, go back to the vendor and have them fix it. Consider e-discovery tools to ensure ongoing compliance and management. E-discovery tools now becoming more important as the information is becoming more distributed. So you have distributed environments that may exist within your own company, and then you have the cloud, and you have a whole bunch of other places where your information could be. It could be an email. And e-discovery tools will allow you to do an inventory on your information and really understand how your information is being used and where your risks are. And it also helps you with compliance and overall ongoing management. Consider conducting penetration testing on these tools out there. And actually, what's interesting, these tools actually came from hackers. So these tools that allow you to go against your own network by providing a series of IP addresses, and it'll actually tell you where your vulnerabilities are. So you can then take steps to optimize. So that's what we have today on information security policy. If you have any questions, feel free to send them directly to my email address at john.lalutis@superiortechnology.com. I'd be happy to send you a response. So I have some questions here, and I'll answer the first one is, what are the risks of an employee checking their personal social media accounts from their computer at work? And I would have to say the risk is relatively small. Again, the social media itself is not necessarily a threat. Where social media becomes more of a threat is actually what information is being exchanged in there. The social media environment, due to the nature how it's constructed, is open. There's really no way to protect the information that's in there, so you don't want to have a conversation about one of your customers' accounts and why their account number is not working correctly, and trying to figure something out there. As innocent and as well-meaning as you may want to be, that's not the place to exchange that kind of information. But actually accessing social media accounts from the computer at work is not an issue today. It used to be with some of the older social media accounts, but they're pretty safe right now. I got another question. QuickBooks wants me to move my business from my PC to the cloud. Is that a good, safe idea? It depends. The thing with the cloud, there's many considerations when you start looking at cloud computing. At this point, I'd be a little concerned about security. The cloud has secure environments. There's a lot of companies out there that provide a acceptable level of security, but there's really not a lot of management behind that. So if things change, there's really no one looking out for what's going on in that environment. So if things change and there is a hole opened and something happens, there's really the only way you're going to find out is when something bad happens. But the cloud, I think, has got a lot of purposes, it's got a lot of uses, and I think something like, if you want to do accounting from the cloud, I don't necessarily see an issue with it. I would just want to have a discussion with my cloud provider about security and what my options are there. Some of the cloud providers do provide you with tools to do that. If they have that, then I don't see an issue. Any other questions? Any thoughts about what would be a reasonable amount of money for a small business with a couple of computers to budget for antivirus, firewalls, etc.? The infrastructure component is far more important. Antivirus, you want to make sure that you do as much on the front end to proactively eliminate viruses and malware and spyware before they come in. It depends on how many locations the small business would have, but assuming one location, you could probably put in a secure environment for $2,000 to $3,000 to cover that. That would be my guess, assuming that there's around 10 computers as well. Any other questions? All right. If there's no other questions, again, you don't have to. If you got my email address, feel free to email me at any time, and I'd be more than happy to address your questions. I want to thank everyone today for coming to the webinar about information security policy. I think it's an important subject, one that doesn't get enough focus, and it's going to become more and more of an issue. And it's good that there's a process in place that you could take a structured approach to put solutions in for security. So I want to thank you again, and have a great day. Thank you.